Okay, thank you and welcome to this meeting of the Executive Member for Finance and Major Projects, held in consultation with the Executive Member for Housing and Safer Neighbourhoods on Friday the 24th of March. Item 1 on the agenda is declarations of interest. I have no interest to declare.
I don't, no.
Item 2 is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March 2023. I'm happy to agree those as a correct record, and I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Item 3, public participation. We have no members of the public registered to speak, I believe. So that takes us to the substantive item, which is Household Support Fund, item 4, and I'll hand over to Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the 6th scheme since the beginning of the pandemic, followed by, obviously, the cost of living crisis that we're asking you to approve. That follows the winter support grants through COVID and followed by the local COVID support grants, and then 3 other household support funds. So you will recognise many aspects of this scheme. The full scheme is shown in Annex A, and the government's guidance is shown in Annex B. So I think the easiest way to summarise the scheme, if I can take you to paragraph 10 and the table there, I'll talk you through the different aspects of what we're proposing to do. And of course, because we've been given a year's funding rather than 6 months funding, we've tried to take a much more holistic and longer term approach. Not only from a cash first perspective, so we're getting the payments out to residents, and we now know who they are from the previous schemes. We're targeting them in the same way as we have done in the past. And we're proposing 2 payments in the year, one prior to the summer holidays, one prior to Christmas. But we're also building on our wraparound approach, which we're taking through our financial inclusion strategy that was approved a couple of weeks ago, which is to ensure that people are supported to claim as much as they possibly can, but also to look at any underlying causes that may help through identification, resolve some of those issues, and refer on to community support or voluntary support within their own areas. So we are taking that longer term approach. So you see in there the payment scheme, and Paul can talk you through that if you want any more detail. We have that will be by application in June, but we're intending to make the November payment automatic, so they don't have to apply twice. But we have to have a discretionary scheme as well, so there's an allowance in there for discretionary. From the last scheme, we've brought in an amount for care leavers and foster carers, and the relevant organisations will distribute that funding. You have a balancing figure in there for food and fuel vouchers, which may go up or it may go down, depending on what's left in the scheme at the year end. And that's the most efficient use of the grant to make sure we don't hand anything back to government. There's the Practical Energy Savings Scheme. I can't remember who delivers that for us, but we've run that for a second time now.
Yeah, York Energy Advice.
That's right. The new elements then are the advice worker. So this is an extra person working with the voluntary and community sector and within communities, not only to provide that wraparound advice, which some of the agencies struggle to give at the same time as issuing the vouchers, because they're dealing with people who are very much in desperation, and it's not always the right time to have that conversation, and they've not always got the resources. So this is to provide an extra person that will support that process. But the other element of their work will be to try and target the groups that we've not identified so far. So, for example, we may have people who have been communicated to and targeted to be notified about the scheme, but have never applied, or the various schemes, and they've never applied. And we need to understand why not, and whether actually some people are missing out on applying. The other element is those that may not qualify for the scheme, but are still struggling. And we would feed those individuals into some of the other schemes, such as directing them to voluntary community sector, in the winter the warm places, but also into the credit union loan scheme, which is another new element. That particular scheme is about recycling the funding, so there would be loans of I think to the individual £400 after administration, which would be interest-free and repayable over an agreed period of time. Once that funding comes back in, it would be recycled then to other individuals. So it is a pilot scheme. We're looking to see how that works, and whether we are actually catching people who otherwise we wouldn't be able to cover in household support fund, and that's exactly the purpose of the scheme, isn't it? To really target those groups. Last year we used EFRA funding to fund the Warm Places grant scheme within communities. That was a one-off fund, so we're replacing that again for a second winter, and that will be a grant scheme administered by the communities team again, and that builds on our community hub strategy to continue to support organisations to become self-sufficient within communities. And then there's a figure in there for administration costs. I think I've covered everything there. So shall I stop there at the minute? I'll come back and continue. But are there any questions about the different components of the scheme?
No, just straightforward.
Well, I could ask this now. It's more about I think I've asked this before, but I think it's quite important. The actual application process. So the bulk of the scheme, as you said, although the other bits are really important, but the bulk of it goes to working age council tax support claimants, and you make that as easy as possible. But I sometimes think it's quite hard to get across. It doesn't just land in their bank accounts, does it? There's a process. You send a letter and then they do have to make a brief application. So could you just clarify that?
Forgive me, we have to do that really, because obviously we can't assume that their bank account remains the same as before.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore we do receive, obviously, when we do make payments, a number of bounce backs where the bank account for some reason fails. So we have to ask them each time to be absolutely certain, and also make sure that we have got the right customers. So it is right to write to those customers and invite them to apply. It obviously causes a bit of an administration delay, therefore, in getting the cash to them. But it's right that we actually do that and give them the opportunity even to refuse if they don't want the money. I know that sounds ridiculous, but some people, it is surprising how many people don't come back to us. The one thing about the new administrative role that Pauline has already mentioned is that would seek to engage with those people to see why they're not applying.
Yes.
And that's an important change in this scheme.
Yeah.
So although it is a little bit wieldy in making customers apply, we can't assume, the main reason is we can't assume their bank account numbers remain the same as the last scheme, which obviously they may have received a payment a year ago.
Yeah.
So
So I think it's just really getting across that there will be a letter and you have to respond to it.
Yes. Yeah.
And there will be reminders as well.
We do. We actually follow that up to the non-responders to try and get the money to as many of those people as we can.
Thank you.
Good, carry on.
Yeah.
So in terms of the next process, with what is also different this time is that we have to submit a delivery plan to the government, which they will expect to be monitored and reported on. And we can do that through the welfare, 6 monthly welfare and financial inclusion report, so we can report that in public. But they are expecting that delivery plan at the beginning of May, which of course was very challenging for us as an organisation. So we're grateful for the members of being able to set up this decision session for us to get the relevant approvals. So you are asked to approve the recommendations and delegations paragraph 2, A to C. They are very similar to the discretions and delegations that you've approved for previous schemes. And finally, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you for your support of the 6 schemes, and thank you to the staff group who have remained consistent throughout, who've developed the schemes and delivered them, and hopefully been able to support our families and individuals across the city during a very, very difficult time, and they continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments, Councillor Briggill?
Just a few comments, I think. I think, as you've explained, Pauline, in many ways this scheme is similar to previous ones, but with some significant improvements as well. I'm sure that this funding will be very, very welcome for those families and the individuals who receive it, and will make a big difference. It is, as you do say in the paper, still unfortunately a relatively small amount compared to the level of need that we're seeing through the cost of living crisis, but hopefully it is going to make quite a difference. I welcome that the scheme does last for 12 months rather than 6, more efficient for everyone, and it provides more flexibility that you've described to ensure the money is being used to meet needs as effectively as it can, rather than just the certain percentages that you have to allocate to a certain group of people. So I'm really glad that the council is using that flexibility to the maximum effect in this scheme. And whilst that major part of the funding will go to households most in need via individual payments, I really welcome using some of the money to make the help we're able to give as effective as possible, and to build that capacity, to help us to build capacity as we have been doing across the city and in communities. And I think working with voluntary sector partners to provide food and fuel vouchers, supporting the community hubs, the warm places, the food provision, the additional energy vouchers and measures, and that joined up support with advice services can really help people access more income. And I'm really pleased that you've got the outreach worker post in there as well. And particularly to help people who don't tend to use digital services. I think that last one is really, really important, to try and make sure that some people are not excluded for that reason. And I'm pleased to see the interest-free loan scheme, which also meets the needs of another group of people. So I think this funding will really help to support a lot of different people: children, pensioners, unpaid carers, care leavers, disabled people, and others who don't fall into any particular category. I really would also like to thank the staff for all the work you've done on these schemes, because it's been some amazing work to get that money out. So very happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you. Not left much for me to say there, Denise.
No, sorry.
I think it's probably a period of reflection. As you say, it's the sixth time we've done this. It seems like a lifetime ago when we first had that, like December 2020, and the first time the Winter Support Grant, and all the, not panicked, but the urgent work that was done around that period to work out how we're going to deal with these. And then, as you say, that rolling process ever since, from the 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. And that's how Denise touched something I was going to say about that. Actually having 12 months to plan is so much better and gives us so much possibility in terms of doing that. But I think that is probably the one thing I do feel a little bit of concern around, is that, as we always do when we get government grants, this is the 6th grant. It's been going for 3 years now. It is something that we're very used to. It's something that those individuals who receive the support are very used to, but it is not technically a long-term funding stream. It is not something that we can rely on. And while we have got 12 months of certainty, there is that reality for some people. I think we discussed this at the last session. When the support ends, and the way the government is going with local government finance and the increases in council tax to support adult social care, there is a real potential for a disconnect from where people's council tax bills will be in 12 months' time, minus this level of support that they're receiving at the moment. It could well be that we're looking at about 10, 15, 20% jump for those individuals if this isn't continued. So I think we do need to be mindful of that, and we do need to be working with central government to say, not that you've created dependency, but people have become used to this. That's 3 years, that's a long period of time for people to have that level of support. And if in 12 months' time that's taken away, people will face really significant financial issues as a result of that. So we need to be mindful. We need to keep working with people to make sure if that cliff edge does come, that we're supporting them in any way we possibly can, but making clear to government that they need to be aware of that and they can't just pull the plug on schemes such as this. And then I think, my final thing was that bit that Denise touched on, was just my thanks to the staff. I think it was
I'll pass that on.
Again, it seems like such a long time ago, and I was sat in my bedroom discussing this with you via Zoom under those sort of urgent COVID protocols with everyone in lockdown and all of those things. And it was something that was entirely new and entirely rapid and so important and so urgent. And the speed with which staff were able to support residents and businesses during that period was absolutely
Not to forget
unbelievable.
businesses.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think I will never forget those days when we were being hammered by everybody about, well, you've had this money and why has nobody got this money and everything. And it was so refreshing when the information came through, and we were one of the fastest paying local authorities in the country. And that's entirely down to the work that staff have done and been able to do that. And that's not their day, it's become their day-to-day job in many ways. But at the time it wasn't. It was a new scheme. It was something they were doing over and on top of everything they'd
They
done.
were working 24/7 at that time. They really were.
It's been probably the highlight of my time as an exec member in that particular portfolio, working with those teams and the work they've done. And I extend thanks on behalf of myself, Councillor Crackhill, and the administration, and all of those residents that received their support. So I think with that, I'm happy to agree the recommendations. Okay. And I have no urgent business, you'll be glad to know. So I think, is this the last meeting of the council?
It's the last decision session.
So do we have any more? Because planning's been cancelled.
Plan.
Plan B.
Oh, planning B. So we don't have the distinction of being the last meeting of the
Oh,
cycle.
planning B. Oh, yeah. Right.
Okay. So happy to declare the meeting closed.